But I've been thinking about Jake Paul a little bit, which is, sad and a reflection of how many poor choices I've made in my life, Rashad, that I've come to a position at age 41. I have to spend time thinking about this dweeb. But there is something that you just can't deny about him. So I'm going to make a statement. I'll defend it, but I would love to get your reaction to it first. I believe that if you are looking around and you're asking why are people interested in Jake Paul fighting either this opponent or any other, some more than others, the answer to me is going to be that this guy is the YouTube boxing or YouTube combative sports heir to Kimbo Slice. People don't want to admit that because Kimbo Slice is extremely beloved and Jake Paul is largely polarizing or reviled by many corners. So there's some meaningful differences between the two. And Kimbo got famous YouTube fighting, whereas Jake Paul built fame on Vine, then on YouTube through his antics, and has transitioned into this. But here's why I bring this up, Rashad, because all the similarities are there, right? Using YouTube as a platform for fame, and you're not really fighting. You're kind of like stunt fighting, which is still very difficult to do, but it's not actual fighting, So there's a little bit different there. And two, I remember this, Rashad. Don't you remember when Kimbo was starting to make his move into MMA, and then you had like Bas Rutten training with him, and they'd be like, wow, he's so much better than I thought he would be. And all these little nuggets of information coming out from different fighters, different camps, be like, wow, Kimbo works really hard, blah, 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 blah. You're seeing the exact same thing to a degree with Jake Paul. You're seeing Violent Bob Ross come out and say he's so much better than I thought, and all these other little validators. So of that thesis, what do you make? Is Jake Paul the heir to Kimbo Slice?
I can see that. But one thing that, for me that stands out, as a Kimbo fan, what captured my attention with Kimbo was just the rawness of what he did, with those backyard fights and everything like that. I think that's what captivated me. And I just don't get that rawness, but I do understand the same sentiment with the YouTube and making it, making it, his vehicle to reach these fans. So I do understand it in that respect. So, yeah, I mean, I can see the similarities, but here's the thing though, does Jake Paul, because Kimbo was beloved in the fact that he was just so intimidating, and the fact that, when he went out there, he was knocking guys' eyeballs out, and then you got to know him, and then he was like this soft, nice guy. So that was the appeal with Kimbo. But with Jake Paul, he's just so trolly. You just can't stand him, and you just want to see him get destroyed. You know what I'm saying? But then you find out that on the other side of it, that he's actually pretty decent. And to that point, Jake Paul, actually tried to get some sparring with Tyrone Spong when he first came down to Florida to start this camp. And I was just surprised. I mean, listen, Tyrone Spong is an animal inside the ring or a cage or whatever. But even in training, Tyrone is somebody you just don't want to even spar with. You know what I'm saying? So for him to call out Tyrone, it just showed me just that he was believing in his own hype a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's did Spong do it?
No, well, it didn't end up happening, but it was dangerously close to happening. And I was going to go and see it, man, because Tyrone, he was going to body you. He was definitely going to body that
motherfucker like a summer job. I mean, that was going to get ugly. Yeah. He's definitely believing his own hype a little bit, which, I guess if you're going to do that kind of thing, on some level you're supposed to. See, here's the thing. I agree with you. Like, there are real meaningful differences. This is not an argument to say that, like, Jake Paul is today's Kimbo Slice, because you're right. Kimbo featured very differently. He was the Jaws underneath the water, this very intimidating, menacing figure at first. Then transitioned. I remember Dan Le Batard wrote a story about Kimbo being homeless after one of the hurricanes had hit Florida. So he had this hard Scrabble story, and then you met his family, and then he was trying to do different things, and he became a sympathetic, soft figure. In that sense, he's quite different from Jake. But you have to ask yourself, if YouTube fighting is going to be a thing, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, if it's going to be a thing, you're going to get heroes, you're going to get villains too. You're not going to get just one or the other. It's going to produce, to me, a whole bevy of different people. And I agree that, Jake Paul is so trolly. So to me, he's like the heir to Kimbo Slice, but he brought in modern internet culture is just troll culture everywhere. Whether you watch movies on the internet, whether you're involved in like cinema internet, combat sports internet, food internet, all of it is troll culture. It's seeped into every part. He has taken that to the nth degree, but then following in some of the footsteps that Kimbo did. So he's remixed it, Rashad, but to me it's a difference in degree, not a difference in kind.
I understand that. Yeah, definitely, man. That troll culture is something key that you hit on too. It's everywhere, and it's something that, until I heard you put it like that, it really wasn't crystallized in my mind as being a total concept, but now that you said it like that, it is, man. I mean, people have taken this whole trolling thing to a whole nother level, and Jake Paul is the king of the trolls. I mean, this guy, for him to even build up this fight, even to get the fight, I was just like, yo, somebody's got to shut this dude up. I mean, he's running around just talking crazy to everybody.
He talks wild. So let's get to this fight here just a little bit. You had indicated you were like in general, you could take it or leave it, but this particular one you wanted to take. Now, or you were interested in more. What do you make of this framing? People always ask this question, and I try to answer the best that I can, which is Jake Paul good? And I never know what they mean by good. I never know what they mean by bad. It's hard to answer that question, which is why, Rashad, I described him. And if you have a better way to describe it, please, by all means, let me know. But I kind of described him, and I did this to BC. I don't know how he felt about it. I do think that the stunt boxing is a good way to describe it. Because, dude, if you're like a stunt performer, that's not an easy job. Like, you actually do have to train for that. You have to be prepared for that. It's dangerous. It could go poorly. But you also have to have some skills to execute a stunt. But that's not the same thing as actually doing the thing. It's a controlled version of it. And so I think that he probably has a degree of ability, but like until you actually fight real pros in real challenges, to me you're only going to be a stunt boxer. Am I being unfair?
No, you're not being unfair at all. I think that there's definitely a graduation process that he needs to go through in order to be considered a real fighter, and fighting a guy like Ben Askren is a step along the way, but it's not totally that direction, being the fact that, Ben Askren is a professional in a different discipline. So he's taking the steps to become a real fighter. Now it's just a matter of, does he have that fight in him? Can he transform and become a real fighter? We'll see, because what makes a fighter is if we can watch a fight, and we can get emotionally pulled into your struggle and how you're able to pull it off and just, being able to see you fight through some things. I think that's when, people start, okay, this guy has some fight in him. Apart from the skill level alone, right? Because you got to have some skills in order to even be considered a fighter in some degree. But Jake Paul has that. Jake Paul has some pretty good ones and twos, has some pretty good power, knows his basics pretty well, has a lot of confidence that can carry him far. But now he's going against a guy in Ben Askren who is a real fighter. If Ben isn't anything, he's definitely a fighter, and in the respect of the fact that, he's one guy who can grind and he can, bring the fight from a different perspective and compete at a higher level. And can Jake compete at that level? That's the real question.
Would you be surprised if either guy got tuned up?
I would really be surprised if Jake Paul got tuned up. Either guy get tuned up, because I just can't see, for one, Ben Askren being able to tune anybody up with those hands. I mean, his hands are terrible. They're terrible.
They're not great.
He looked like he's out there swatting flies. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be interesting to see how he's able to throw that into a punching combination. What I foresee is that him throwing one punch, him tying up, and then through the frustration, being able to land some shots that can maybe hurt Jake Paul. But Ben is not even known for his power, so there's a lot of different things that can, make this fight interesting. But at the end of the day, I think that this is Jake Paul's fight to lose.
That'll be interesting to see. To me, it's like, what would the results mean if Jake wins? And I'm like, not a whole lot. Like, to your point, Ben's striking was never great or even really good. or even really there. I mean, there's just a lot of problems with it, and which I think even he would probably, for the most part, admit. And then he had a hip replaced after he retired. He's come back now. Now, I know he's felt better, but it's like, how many times can you brag about a win over, I jacked the jaw of a guy who had a hip replacement? Okay. I mean, it's not nothing, but I don't really know that it's some kind of high water mark. And they're going to use it to launder. They are. They're going to use it to launder the truth. They're going to say, Jake beat a UFC fighter. They're going to say that as if that's like some kind of grand pronouncement rather than them like getting they found the guy with like probably even admittedly the worst hands maybe ever in modern UFC. Great wrestler, obviously, and tremendously strong, and a decorated athlete at one point in his life. Waited till he had a hip replacement and then boxed him up, and they're going to be like, oh, see? That's the dishonesty about it is kind of what I really hate the most, if I could just be honest with you, Rashad.
What's that? The
dishonesty of like, I beat a UFC fighter. It's like, well,
yeah.
Did you?
With this whole thing, what gets me as well too is that you have Ben Askren, and with the fight, is this fight going to be a fight that that can build some momentum from Jake? Because at the end of the day, Jake can just keep on doing this. Jake can just keep on having these Triller fights because he doesn't never need to raise his level. He has enough interest on his platform that beating a guy like Ben Askren can get him a fight with somebody else along the same lines, somebody with less experience in boxing and whatnot, and keep on doing the same thing over and over again and keep on just racking up these checks, because the truth of the matter is this does have a following, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, people like to see what an average guy can do. And I think that's one thing that Jake hits, that he's able to really capture with this whole YouTube fighting is this is an average guy. This is like pros versus Joes pros versus Joes back in the day, and that's what this is like. Okay, Jake is the Joe, and you have the pro and Ben Askren. Can he do it?
It'll be interesting to see. So you're definitely going to watch on Saturday? What's your plan?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch this. I gotta watch it. It's like an accent. I gotta watch it, man, because I'm cheering for Ben Askren. I mean, I don't want to see him lose. I don't want to see that stain on MMA. But I almost feel like it's inevitable.
Yeah, I don't really know what to expect, candidly. Like, you could tell me that, to your point, Ben's going to go in there and overhook one hand, and then not dirty box, but, short little uppercuts underneath until the referee separates over and over and over again, and like somehow will either win or the fight will suck enough that you don't really care who won or lost, something like that. Like, I can see that as totally plausible. I can see, him getting stretched, to be quite honest with you. That being plausible as well. Likely, I don't know, but plausible. And so, for those reasons, actually, I'm a little bit curious to see what happens, but I don't think that, again, if folks ask me, is he good? I'm like, okay, how many boxers has Jake Paul fought in a boxing match?
Right,
0.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, start doing that, and we can more, accurately assess, how what your skill level is.
MMA's toughest tournament rages on. So is that all you got? When newly crowned champ Vadim Nemkov returns to the cage to face Phil Davis. So is that all you got? Then Corey Overtime Anderson is on the attack to take down rising star Wolfhound Yakshi Morodo. Round and ball! As the hunt for the title heats up, the Bellator MMA Light Heavyweight World Grand Prix, live Friday, April 16th on Showtime.